This is actually our alpha server, which is why we're actually sort of popping out of game with this debug client. So if we see other players, they're hopefully it's the middle of the night for most of them. But here's one of our sort of higher end armor sets, but I guess this would be sort of mid to high range. So we're going to talk a little bit about the class system now, which is where I've spent more hours probably than any other part of our game. At first it looks like a classic talent tree, which is great because we want you to understand it from the get-go. The first thing I'll point out is that you are all 3 of these souls at the same time, and there are 8 of them per calling. And you can have any 3 equipped at any one time. Up top we have the branches, which are where you spend your points. This is where you customize your individual souls. So as you spend points, you're going to invest into the roots. And the roots are where we give you guaranteed abilities. So in the roots we'll give the Pyromancer his fireball, because Pyromancers do not work without a fireball. This is also where we can give you more cosmetic abilities like underwater breathing that we wouldn't want you to have to spend a point on for this sort of flavor. You can also unlock abilities and augment abilities up in the branches. And something interesting that I found out about 3 days ago was that Sebastian and I actually play the same wacky Chloromancer Necromancer build, but he spends his points entirely differently than I do. I make mostly a Chloromancer build because I'm enjoying healing my pet and moving into groups quite freely, whereas he's putting most of his points in the Necromancer, and his 3rd soul is, I think he splashes an Archon, because even without any points, you still get signature abilities from that soul. So in this case, you get the Pyromancer's Powerful Fireball, which is a great go-to spell. And in this case, he may actually use that to do his healing with. So all of his Chloromancer healing, which is actually a mage healer, can be triggered by his attack abilities from the Necromancer, his debuffs from the Necromancer, from his pet, and from his Pyromancer Fireballs. The most important thing to point out about this soul tree is that you are not one role. You are not a tank because you picked a warrior. You are not a ranged DPS because you picked a mage. We just saw him pick a Chloromancer, which is a healer. The Archon is a group enchanter, a buffer. And these souls wouldn't work as their own classes. In fact, the Archon would be probably pretty miserable to play. You can't solo very well with it. He doesn't have many attack abilities. He doesn't have a pet or anything to prevent damage from getting in. But you never have to rely on any one soul in our game. That's why we've picked, our favorite, we've picked sort of tributes to our favorite classes from other games and are giving them our own unique spin, like a Warlock or a Necromancer, which you've seen in every MMO. But then we also have our new classes like Archons and Chloromancers, which just wouldn't work in games, period. So the days of sort of spending an hour looking for that last healer slot or looking for one of the rare few tanks on your server, those are over, because hopefully you're just switching to one of your other specs. We allow you to say about 4 roles at any given time, so 4 different arrangements of souls, and you can respec those individually for a cost. So one thing probably like to mention is that you can imagine this is pretty crazy in PvP. I think on the boards we have...
Yeah, I mean, all the time we have people trying, I found the best combination, but that's not really true. We have a new best combination every day. So,
yeah. The rock, paper, scissors of this is pretty incredible. We're just seeing the tip of the iceberg, but when any individual soul gets an improvement or a nerf, in any other game, that would then be quickly outmoded, and you better have an ult, because otherwise you're just going to be complaining. In our game, if you want that Necromancer to work and you think it's too weak, you can combine it with other souls that make it viable. And every soul right now is pretty viable in PvP. And there's also a PvP soul to obtain that can give you, that has different sort of endpoints in that soul, where you can get individual durability abilities, or you can get group heals. I mean, it's really quite amazing what we're seeing in PvP, especially in our Warfronts. But I'm most interested as the Rift designer to see how it interacts with our dynamic systems, both in the leveling game and at the end of the game. So I guess we'll throw up that map again for a second. Right now we've got, that's interesting. Okay. Right, you can see that on our map you can roll over for a ton of information. You can see all the scenes in the game, the different cities, and a lot of them will have icons where you can sort of get more information on the particular location in question. But the most prominent thing here is the dynamic content. You can see we have footholds and rifts open everywhere. You can even see an invasion coming from that foothold right down there. Rifts are the cornerstone of our dynamic content. We'll head over to one right now. And when one of them opens, if you don't close it, invasions will be sent out into the wilderness to try to create fonts of that sort of magic. So in the case of that death rift over there, it's going to send out death invaders to try to create profane idols that just pump death magic in the world, trying to convert it. They will also try to take over your hubs. which is very interesting, and it's actually worked out quite well despite our worst fears, that you can interrupt the player's questing and they will appreciate it occasionally. So in this case, we're going to enter this water rift, and you'll see that the water rift is actually flooding the terrain. We've changed the grass, we've changed the sky, we've brought in terrain pieces, we've even changed the sound. You get some of the best music changes in our game as you head from an orchestral soundtrack in a beautiful elf forest like Silverwood, and a light or a fire rift will open up, and suddenly it's something out of Battlestar Galactica with chanting and drums, and it's just fantastic. I think the most important thing to point out with regards to any of our dynamic content is this widget up here. These are shared objectives for anybody in the area. MMOs, despite the amount of people that play them, are actually pretty poor at dealing with these people in the same place. If you think about any quest system, the objectives you have on your quest are competitive with the objectives everybody else has. And unless this quest is designed to be grouped, or has been designed well and can be grouped to sort of finish, you're competing against each other for the mobs that spawn. That's not the case in Rifts, it's not the case in any of our dynamic content. What we do for rewards and for credit is we measure contribution. And you can see that that bar next to the widget, as Sebastian cheats his way through this, is actually getting quite high. He's getting a lot of effort, and that effort is tabulated and sort of compared softly against other people in the Rift, or other people in the Invasion or the Zone event, to see how much contribution you get at the end of that particular stage. The more stages you can push through, the more contribution you'll get, the more rewards will flow, and those rewards head to everybody independently. We also have a leaderboard to show how you're doing. I imagine that Sebastian's doing quite well. I'm waiting. Yeah. And we also, this is the first of the time stages. And this is a mini-boss that shows up. This sort of indicates when the soloing can stop at this event. If you defeat this mini-boss, you'll actually earn some good rewards. But if you can defeat him inside the timer, because other people showed up, you'll push into the sort of the unstable stages of the Rift, which are the bonus stages. At this point, the Rift wants to close. You've defeated the primary attackers, but if you can keep pushing, you can steal a little bit of the power of the planes for yourself.